Do you remember those times when the milkman would always bring the tastiest fresh milk to your house? He was always cheerful, and everyone was happy to see him too. Or when you would sit in front of the television with your whole family because you wanted to watch that one program. You couldn't re-watch it back then. The baby boomer era, a time when people could still have a chat with a stranger, were not so busy with social media, and enjoyed life. As we turned the leaves of the photo album, I saw tears building up in Grandpa's eyes. He looked at each photo in a way as if reliving the moment when it was taken. He could relate every tiny bit of detail about when and where it was taken, what the occasion was, and why he was wearing that particular dress. Pictures used to be special back then. Every photo was taken with great attention to the setting, the background, the poses, and the whole say cheese routine. Significant time was spent on the preparation, and the result was a masterpiece that would freeze that moment forever on a piece of paper. Now, we click hundreds of pictures in a single day on our smartphones, but none can match the value that those Polaroid camera pictures hold. And though your phone's gallery is nearing its storage capacity, the nostalgic feelings that a photo album could create cannot be replicated. Baby boomers are ready to give up their smartphones to go back to Polaroid cameras, but there's something that even they would not want to go back to. Someone lighting up a cigarette in an airplane. If someone lights up a cigarette in an airplane, what do you think will happen? Well, he'll probably be kicked off the plane and maybe charged with fines. But back in the baby boomer era, it was a common practice. In those days, the footpaths used to be lined with cigarette butts. You'd find people standing at every corner puffing out smoke. It was harder being a non-smoker. Smoking groups were common in offices, and smoking breaks were observed officially. Those who didn't even like to smoke did so not to feel left out. Cigarette smoking was not only acceptable, it was glamorized in mainstream media. There were no restrictions, and people could smoke freely in public places, often around children. It wasn't until the late 20th century that the harmful effects of smoking began to gain attention. After the publication of scientific studies linking smoking with various diseases like lung cancer, public awareness campaigns were launched throughout the country, which led to the decline of cigarette smoking. Though cigarette smoking is far from over, it is nowhere near as prevalent as it was in the baby boomer era. In addition to cigarettes, the mainstream media also played a role in the popularity of suits in the baby boomer era. If you find a cupboard full of suits, you're either at Barney Stinson's or at the house of a baby boomer. Since formal dressing was enforced in the offices back in those days, you had little choice. But even when you had a choice, like when visiting the church or a restaurant, it was considered only proper to wear a suit. All kinds of suits were worn in those days, depending on the occasion. If it was a formal setting, like a business meeting, then the preferred choice was either a double-breasted or pinstriped suit. If it was something casual, like a date or a party, then most men opted for a slim fit or a plaid suit with its bold color patterns. The Brooks brothers were just as popular among businessmen as they are today. However, young men preferred Pierre Cardin and Chip with their innovative fashionable designs. The elegance that the boomers exuded is something that the denim-wearing generation of today cannot relate to. The enforcement of formal wear in offices promoted a professional environment where people were concerned about how they presented themselves. A suit was also considered a status symbol, and you were more likely to get better treatment from others if you were wearing a suit. Now, people don't care about their presentation. Companies, too, have lifted the restriction on clothing. Casual wear is not only allowed, but is encouraged. On one hand, this saves people time and effort in dressing up. But on the other, it has promoted a casual environment in the offices where people are less likely to take their time seriously. Boomers sure loved formal wear, but that doesn't mean that they didn't know how to have fun. And what can be more fun than watching a movie while relaxing in your car? For lazy and introverted people like me, how convenient it is to just stay put in our car and enjoy a movie at the same time. No need to walk into a crowded cinema, find ourselves a seat, and then keep getting irritated by that one crying toddler whose parents couldn't figure out his problem. Drive-in cinemas were a popular way of enjoying movies during the baby boomer period, owing in part to the exponential increase in car ownership during this period. People would take their family and kids along, pick something to eat along the way, and then have sort of a family picnic in the parking of a drive-in cinema while enjoying the movie. It was also a favorite dating spot among young couples since they could enjoy some alone time in their car. However, with the rise of televisions and indoor cinemas, the popularity of these drive-ins has plummeted. The increased price of real estate has also contributed to the decline of these cinemas. Of the 4,000 drive-in cinemas that used to operate in America, only 30 are still operational. COVID breathed life into these cinemas once again, since it was a perfect way to enjoy a movie while still maintaining social distancing. But the peak time for the drive-in cinemas has already passed. Though some of the drive-in cinemas are still active even today, the same cannot be said about fine china. That was one of the highlights of the baby boomer era. It was 1958 when Mom finally bought that dinner set. Taking advantage of her interest in the intricate artwork on the dishes, the storekeeper was demanding an astronomical amount. Yet she didn't budge an inch and used up all her savings to bring the fine porcelain into her house. The first thing that she did after bringing the china over was to host a dinner party in her house. 'Cause what good are the exquisite pieces of cutlery, catching dust in the kitchen cabinet? As the guests came over, she made it a point to display the china in a way that would highlight their craftsmanship. That evening was all about the new china set, and it soon became the talk of the town. That's how much importance a fine china set had for the baby boomers. China sets were a necessity in every boomer's house. No one could imagine a dinner party without these dishes. But as the frequency of fancy dinner parties dropped in the subsequent generations, so did the value of fine china. As Mom was remembering this, sitting with her beloved china that her daughters had refused to accept as an heirloom, she could just lament the fate of her precious possession. A china set sure has many memories associated with it, but they were prone to damage and shattering upon the slightest of impacts. You could always buy a new set of china. But what if a phone book were to get damaged, or worse, misplaced? Making a phone call wasn't so simple back in the baby boomer era. There were no memory cards or internal storage inside the phones, and a phone book handled all the heavy lifting. That bulky pile of paper looked so intimidating. Finding a number that you had noted years back was a real struggle. You couldn't carry it everywhere you went, though. If you had to note a number out on the street, like that of a shop, or a long-lost friend that you ran into, you'd either take a note of it on a piece of paper, which would later be transferred to the phone book, or there were pocket-sized diaries that most people kept. And what if some liquid got spilled on the phone book? There were no backups for the data the phone book held, so they were kept well preserved, out of reach from children. As a boomer, it's sad to see the demise of phone books, but it is also a fact that there is no use for phone books anymore. Thousands of numbers can now be saved in our smartphones that we can carry anywhere. And we can create a backup for the data too. Boomers didn't just write numbers in phone books, they jotted everything down by hand. And just like the fate of phone books, the way of the pen is also on the verge of extinction. With a pot of ink on the side and a blank paper on the clipboard, you finally decided to write the essay due in a day. But as you started to write, you noticed a distinct drop of ink on the page, ruining its neatness. You obviously couldn't use that page, so you made a ball out of it and started anew. This time, the whole pot got flipped onto the desk, and then you had a mess to take care of. If you lived in the baby boomer period, you'd relate to the struggle of trying to write something on paper. Handwritten communication was common in those days. Typewriters weren't available to everyone, so most people wrote their letters themselves. Even if typewriters were available, letters to loved ones were preferred to be written by hand to give them a human touch. People also used handwritten letters to impress someone and to ask them out. They'd write poetry, affix flowers, and even spray some kind of fragrance onto the letter to make an impression. Some crazy people went as far as to sign the letter with their blood. With the advent of computers and laptops, the whole culture of writing has taken a blow. Everything from taking notes in the class to signing documents in the office is being done on the computer. Copies and registers have been replaced with tablets, and pens have been replaced with touchpads. All that the boomers can do now is remember the old time, when the human touch was given precedence over convenience. Mobiles and computers have not only robbed us of the human touch, but they have also taken away the fun activities that we used to enjoy with our friends, like roller skating. Roller skating was one of the favorite pastimes of the baby boomer era. When the evening time came, the boys and girls of all ages picked up their roller skates and headed to the streets. The most common skates in those days were the metallic quad roller skates. They were so plain and basic that if you were to look at them now, you'd wonder if those things worked. They had a simple boot-style design, with 4 wheels arranged in a rectangular configuration. Not much attention was given to the aesthetics in those days, but despite being so simple, they could be used for different skating styles and even supported artistic skating. There also were groups, or gangs, as they like to call themselves. These gangs of boys would go out into the streets with their skates in the evening and challenge other gangs to a fight. Not a real fight, but a skating competition. Whenever one of these encounters occurred, people would gather around and enjoy the show. Many of them did it for fun, but then there was the skillful bunch who performed different tricks and moves and made everyone applaud. There were skating arenas in most neighborhoods where young boys could learn how to skate. Then there were roller discos, where people could roller skate to the rhythm of disco music. They were a social hub for teenagers and young adults who could have fun with their friends and socialize while skating to the disco music. Roller skating too lost its popularity over time, and so did the roller discos. First video games and then the internet replaced this fun pastime. Boomers still have their skates with them, but no one to pass the baton to. It seems as if roller skating too would go with the boomers. And just like that, the customs and traditions that the boomers cherished, that they thought would always remain relevant, have now become a part of history.